Hello and welcome to School of Shop. My name is Cameron, and today I wanted to show you how I made these custom leather-bound Harry Potter books. My wife is a huge fan of Harry Potter. Aren't we all? I'm sure that's why you're here. And I was trying to think of a good gift to get her since she likes to collect a bunch of the versions of all the Harry Potter books. So after doing a little bit of research, I came up with a decent idea of how to make a display version of a leather-bound book. Now the way I'm about to show you is not the perfect way to do it. There's a lot of different ways, and the way I did it is, again, it's mostly for display, it's not as much for function. I decided to go with a very minimalist design for each book, going with just the HP logo on the front with a border, and then on the back I did a symbol that was unique to each book. So the first one we got a lightning bolt, second Sword of Gryffindor, then we have a time turner, then we have the Goblet of Fire, then we have the Broken Prophecy, the Astronomy Tower, if you know what happens in the Astronomy Tower, and the Elder Wand. When I was finished, I decided I would paint a silhouette of Hogwarts on the back. So as I was saying, my wife is a huge fan of Harry Potter, and we like to collect as many of the different versions that we can find when we're out and about. In particular, the first one, because there does seem to be the most special editions of that one out there. So like right here, we got the illustrated version. Here is a special leather-bound edition that I'm pretty sure they only made of the first one. I don't think there's a whole set of these. Here's the original, of course. Some more editions of other books. And then the one I just made, of course. And then if we go up here, that red and blue one and yellow and green one there, that's all the first one that they released kind of as a special edition representing each of the Hogwarts houses, which is pretty cool. Then obviously first one there, and then here we got this one in Iceland, and then this one in Japan. I think that's it. Could be wrong. They're all over the house. Alright, so like I was saying, these are mostly for display purposes, not really to be read because we have plenty of copies to read if we need to. I decided to bind these books by gluing them directly to the spine of the leather. Now that works for now, and as long as we never really open them, it will continue to work. However, it's not the best way to preserve your spine over time, and it might eventually come disconnected, and that's a risk I'm willing to take because I didn't really care that much. Start off by grabbing 2 pieces of chipboard, a ruler, and utility blade, and begin to measure out your cover based off of the book that you're using. I based mine off of the paperback Harry Potters and ended up cutting this at 5 by 8¼ inches. As you cut, make sure you are stocked up on plenty of utility blades. I think I went through about 2 blades per book that I made. After that is cut, do it one more time. This first layer of board is going to form the border of our cover. Cut yours however you'd like. I happen to have some scrap wood cut out from the previous 6 books and use that as a template. After the border was removed, I went back and rounded out the corners just by eyeballing it. I didn't really need to be precise here. And repeat. Now for the HP logo in the center, I decided to 3D print it out using the same thickness as the chipboard. Now I know not everyone has access to a 3D printer, but if you do, it really saves you some time because for the first 3 books that I did, I cut it out on the chipboard and it took a very long time and gave me very sore fingers when it was all said and done. I then added super glue all around the edges of the other set of chipboard, placed the borders, weighed them down, and waited about 10 minutes. Then do the exact same thing with the logo. I didn't measure it right to the center, I just eyeballed it until I thought it looked good. Now for the back of each book, I wanted to make something that was unique to each story. I thought about, for this book, using the Deathly Hallows symbol, but my leather was so thick that I didn't think it would come out very well or with very much detail. So I chose to do the Elder Wand. I printed off a picture and glued it down to some scrap chipboard and then very slowly cut it out. After that was cut out, I glued it into place. The next step is to measure the spine of your book. The Deathly Hallows came out to roughly 1 5/8 of an inch. From there I added a 1/2 inch and cut that out on a piece of cardstock because this new spine needs to be a bit thicker than the original to account for the thickness of the chipboard and the leather. From there I lined up the covers face down with the new spine and carefully laid down some tape to hold things in place. Boom, this thing's already looking great. You can stop right here if you want it. But you probably don't want to. Now for the leather, I have a lot to say about leather, so I'll probably pause right here. First off, I did not do a great job of conserving my leather as I worked on each book, which left me with a pretty wonky piece here for the last one. I did a decent job salvaging this, but I wish I had a better piece to work with. That being said, if you end up ordering more, like I did, you might not get a piece that matches the quality of your original, which makes sense, right? Not all cows are the same. Not all strips of leather are going to be identical. So I ordered a new piece and I got some incredibly thin leather that actually looked great and was super easy to work with, but it was completely inconsistent with the rest of the books, which those were very soft and thick leather. Luckily, customer service was very helpful and they allowed me to call them and describe exactly what I was looking for, and they shipped me a new piece of leather which was pretty darn close to the original. So just keep that in mind and plan your resource use accordingly. I then tried to line up my covers on the leather in a way that would give me the most to work with, then cut off the excess. From there, I laid out some foil to keep excess glue from sticking to anything it shouldn't. Then on the front cover, I spread out a layer of PVA glue and used my finger to cover up as much as I possibly could. Try not to go overboard with this glue because if you use too much, it could leave little bubbles underneath your leather, or it just takes forever to dry. I then placed the cover back onto the leather and started pressing the leather down as hard as I could. This step can be pretty difficult based off of the thickness of your leather. Mine was very thick, so I really had to work it down to get the details underneath to pop through. I ended up using a pin and the rounded edge of a paper clip to really press down around the logo and around the border. Next, I spread some glue on the spine and the back cover and using the same technique began to press the leather down. It can be tough to decide how much time to spend on this step. For the most part, you'll find that the cover dries into place pretty quickly, but you may have some spots that just don't want to hold their shape. For those, just take your time alternating between pressing down with a utensil and pressing down with your hand, holding it in place. Next, we can begin to trim away all of the excess leather into neater lines. I found that a good spot was about 1 inch away from the edge, and it just so happened that this architect scale is 1 inch, so it made a great straight edge. Obviously, since this is such a wonky piece of leather, some of the edges are going to be closer than 1 inch. After that, I cut away some of each corner right at 45 degrees. Luckily, my cutting board already has measurements built into it. Then go ahead and remove the tape. You don't need that anymore, and run a bead of glue all the way across the bottom or top edge. From there, you can fold the excess leather over and glue it down. Again, I was very surprised at how fast this glue would bond and keep the leather in place. I then used a piece of scrap wood to help evenly flatten everything out. Next, I trimmed away a bit more of the corner to make the sides easier to fold. Again, this is just because my leather was very thick. You might not have the same problems with a thinner leather. Then repeat and glue in the sides. I once again measured out the spine and glued in a matching piece of leather. This just helped the finished spine be a lot more durable. I wasn't a fan of how the leather looked once folded in because, as I've said, this last piece of leather was not great, so I tried to cut away some more on the inside to make it look a little neater. Alright, so now we're getting somewhere. The next step is to very, very carefully remove the cover from your paperback book. As you do this, you're going to feel like a monster. And yeah, well, you are. I did my best to preserve the spine, just in case I could ever use it again in another project. My wife is a big fan of books with colored edges, so I decided to spray paint these black. Use a clamp and press down on each edge as much as you can. This will help prevent the paint from seeping further into the pages. I then use some standard glossy black spray paint for each edge. While I waited for that to dry, I wanted to level out the inside of the cover by gluing in some more chipboard. So I did some more measuring, cutting, and gluing. After the book was dry, I wanted to make a nicer first page that I could later write inscriptions in. So I folded some cardstock in half and cut it to fit the front page of the original book. I then ran a very thin bead of glue down the spine edge of the book and pressed down my new page. I also did this to the back of the book. From there, I wanted to add a bit more support to the book just to make sure it wouldn't fall apart after losing its original paperback spine. So I took some cutting fabric, color didn't matter, and cut a piece that was about 3/4 as long as the original spine and glued it to the center. After that, it's obvious that the orange didn't look great, so I cut out some strips of black cardstock to glue over the top of the fabric. Next, for a real nice finished look, I added some black and white striped headbands to the top and bottom of the spine. Now what I'm about to show you here is wrong. This is not how a real leather book is bound. A real leather book is bound by gluing the outermost pages to the backside of the covers, leaving the spine free and unattached, which makes it more flexible as you open it. I tried that and I just couldn't get it right, and I didn't want to ruin this cover so far into the process. So I just thought, hey, these are for display, it doesn't need to be perfect. I'm just going to glue the spines together. So that's what I did. And I have no complaints, but if you want to see it done right, you should probably check out some other videos as well. So to help everything stick together, I scored the spine as much as I could. I don't know how much this helped, but it didn't not help. I then used a lot of glue on the spine of the book and the spine of the cover and lined them up as best I could. I then placed some books on either side for support and let that sit all night. Like I said, it's not the exact way, but I think it came out really great. Now how you decorate the cover is up to you. I almost just stopped here because I thought it already looked great and it has this very cool minimalist black and white design, but I went ahead and used some leather paint to add some outlines and details, which still came out really well. But you need to be insanely careful with this part. The last thing you want to do is screw up your paint job after spending so long to get to this point. After that, we're almost done. But I still wanted to preserve what was left of the paperbacks and make them into the very inside cover of the book. So I carefully cut them out and glued them into the final book. With that, each book was finally done, but I couldn't let it end right there because, like I said, these books are for display. So they needed something on the spine worth displaying. So I clamped the books together and laid down a printout of the Hogwarts silhouette, traced it, and painted it on. I then quickly threw a box together to put them all in, and it was finished. Take a look. They are beautiful.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. Hope you learned something. And that's it. I'll see you in the next video.